Start giving me the business. I give a little back.
March 1st, 1999, 20 years ago today, Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko was released in the US for the Sony PlayStation. Gex 3 is a platforming game in the series of games titled Gex, this particular installment being the third entry if that wasn't terribly obvious. The Gex series all focus on the adventures of Gex, a gecko who lives in Maui, Hawaii. Gex is a simple gecko and he loves TV, and therefore the games are inspired and a reference to American TV culture. The entire trilogy of Gex games was developed by Crystal Dynamics, known mostly for their work on Gex, but also the Legacy of Kain games, the Pandemonium games, and the various Tomb Raider titles and reboots. Although it's been 20 years since Gex was shown any love, let's take a look back at the most recent title, Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko. The backstory behind the Gex trilogy is an interesting tale. Gex lived in Hawaii with his mom and 3 siblings while his dad worked for NASA. One day, Gex's dad dies in a rocket explosion, and not knowing how to cope with it, Gex turned to TV and did nothing but sit around and watch TV for days on end. His mom moved them to California and got mad at Gex for watching so much TV, so she sold it. So Gex ran away, never to return to his TV-less mom's house. Later on, Gex's mom informs him that his family had inherited $20 million from his late Uncle Charlie, and with that money, he bought a mansion back in Maui and the largest TV that money can buy. So, essentially, Gex is a TV-addicted, trust-funded gecko that does nothing but sit around and watch TV all day in his Maui mansion. Each game revolves around an evil cybernetic being named Emperor Rez, who is determined to overthrow the world of television called the Media Dimension. Gex travels through the Media Dimension by going through different themed channels that act as levels in the games. Gex is also quite the ladies' man, being in a relationship with Agent Extra from the third game, and at the end of the second game, Gex is drinking in a hotel room with Nikki from the Pandemonium games.
Pardon my tongue, darling.
Come over here, you big stud.
Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko followed suit of the series and was a through-and-through platformer. The Gex series were games that used different voice actors for different regions of the game. The US release featured Dana Gould as the voice of Gex, and the EU release featured Danny John Jules. The game also starred Playboy model and Baywatch star Marlise Andrada as Agent Extra, featured in the live-action cutscenes in the game. This game starts off with Gex in his Maui mansion, chillin', watching TV as usual. He discovers that his partner and lover at the time, Agent Extra, is missing. Extra manages to contact Gex and tell him that she's been kidnapped by Emperor Rez. Gex travels through the Media Dimension again, hopping through channels with the help of his tortoise butler Alfred, as well as 2 new characters that he saves on his travels. One being Rex, a red dinosaur Gex rescued from the block of ice in the Holiday Channel, and the other being Cuz, Gex's cousin, who he saved from the Mafia in the Gangster TV channel. All of them together defeat Rez and save Agent Extra, and the end of the game involves Gex ignoring Alfred calling him about another emergency and going on to get into bed with Agent Extra.
Are you there, sir?
Alfred, not now.
There seems to be an emergency, sir. The world needs your
Alfred,
help.
I can't hear you. The signal seems to be breaking up. Gex, I'll call you later. As I was saying, Extra, my love, it's tail time.
Come here, you silly gecko. Oh, Gex.
The gameplay of Gex 3 largely followed the same design as the second title. Additional vehicles were added such as a tank, a camel, and a snowboard. There's also different costumes that Gex can wear that give him different abilities like gliding or shooting flames. Collectibles are toned down a little bit to just bugs and footprints instead of the variety of collectibles from the second game like skulls or police plates. You can also unlock and play as Rex, Cuz, and Alfred during bonus stages in the game. Development on Gex 3 was done by Crystal Dynamics, same as the first 2 games. This game, however, was much more story-centric than the first 2 games. They also wanted to focus more on Gex as a character, mainly building his personality, giving him some over-the-top animations, better scripting, and better one-liners. They found out that players were not invested into the collectathon of the second game with all the various different collectibles that you could get, similar to games like Super Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie, so they toned it down a little bit and focused on the core collectibles for the third game, and that had a purpose and it motivated the player to collect everything. They also improved the hub world, where Gex accesses the different channels or the levels of the game. In the second game, it was a faceless and boring level, and in Gex 3, it's pretty much its own dedicated level with secrets and hidden items within it. Gex 3 also aimed to push the hardware of the PlayStation. They made bigger levels, more enemies within them, and maintained a higher frame rate throughout the whole game. Crystal Dynamics also impressively implemented environmental mapping on the textures, which is a lighting technique thought to be too intense for the PlayStation's hardware. It made different textures react to light differently, such as metallic items reflecting light or other textures being transparent. Another thing they tried to advance further was the camera system, which they actually just simplified from the second Gex game, but it controlled much better and was much less glitchy. Reception to the game was average to slightly positive, garnering reviews like 7.5 out of 10 from Game Informer and 6 out of 10 from IGN. The N64 version, like most N64 ports, fell short of the PlayStation version. Gex 3 for the N64 suffered from low frame rates, not taking advantage of the analog stick, and failing to compete with the console's platformer competition, like Super Mario 64. The PlayStation version reigned supreme due to better frame rate, more impressive graphics, and the less 3D platformer competition on the Sony console. Gex was Crystal Dynamics' baby, and truly the reason that they made a name for themselves. Gex was even the company's mascot up until the year 2000. The series in total has sold 15 million units on all platforms, Gex 3 being the best selling of the bunch, shipping over 6 million copies. In 1999, it became PlayStation's best selling adventure game of the year with 3 million copies that year alone. It's upsetting that a series that never saw failure just ceased to make any more installments. On February 17, 2015, Square Enix, who now owns Crystal Dynamics, announced that they will allow developers to create games based on some of their old IPs via the Square Enix Collective project, which includes the Gex IP. So a future Gex title is definitely possible, and I would love to see the little gecko make a comeback. Let me know what you think. Did you ever play the Gex games? Would you be interested in a TV and sex-addicted gecko platformer? I mean, that's a rhetorical question, obviously you would. Give me a like if you enjoyed your stay, and subscribe if you want a tail massage from Agent Extra. Hope to see you in the next one. Peace.
Everybody let me hear you say, oh yeah, I hold your hands in the air and wait for my, you just don't care. And if you like fishy grits and all that pimp shit, everybody let me hear you say, oh